we need to re-educate ourselves. We need to learn how to do it all over again. The idea of communicating with the spirits of the other world is to strengthen our bonds with the other world, to keep connected with something that isn't of this physical world, because the physical world is often considered to take second place. The other world, in the way I understand it, takes first place. And within the other world we have the world of dreams and the world of omens and the world of symbolism, the world of ancestors, the world that is the spirit of the natural world that's supposed to shine through from the other world, and all the things that we can't actually get hold of, like we can get hold of things in this physical world. So it's always been important to many prehistoric and tribal people all over the globe, everywhere, to be able to communicate with the spirits of the other world. The spirit used to be contained in just about everything you had around you. For warriors, there was a spirit in their sword and they named it. Or you might have a spirit in your spear or any kind of weapon. It sort of became a friend. We don't always value such communications today because we have spirit communication, if you like, it's seen in a very different light. It's certainly seen as being something that is secondary to what we need to do. It's sort of on the side, it's pushed aside. So when we're talking about a spirit, we tend to think of a ghost. We're looking at something that is to do with tragedy or trauma. Usually somebody hasn't died well and something is left over from their life. The idea of a ghost or a shadow in my culture means that you have to be terribly careful, because if you come across something that's ghostly or shadowy, for want of better terms, it means put the brakes on. And it was considered that animals that you had, horses and dogs, etc., would always be able to recognise when a ghost was around, or when a shadow, if you like, was lurking around. And that meant that you had to take care, because it might mean that something was trying to get into your own spirit and influence you, or influence a few of you, and you didn't want that to happen, because if that happened, then bad luck would obviously follow. Today, it's not really seen anywhere near anything like that. As time has gone by, we don't seem to take omens and symbols and signs from the natural world half as much, because we're not living with it. So we tend to develop this idea that we have to have a person who can see the spirits, and usually they're human spirits, and they're usually bringing messages about your life. But it's usually on a very, very different level to the level that used to be. And usually the spirits will communicate through somebody who is known as a medium. The Lees have, of course, famously cashed in on these ideas of spirit mediums and psychic mediums. But going back, mediumship has experienced some weird and wacky ideas to attract people to itself. And it's not always been authentic, but in other ways it's come to that because we still long to communicate with the other world in any way we can. You can end up with channelers who channel all sorts of weird and wonderful beings. Certain beings that people like to have in their lives these days. I think the idea of angelic beings has been created to try and lift everyone up above all the chaos and trauma and muddle that's going on in the physical world today, and it's an answer to try and find some peace of mind. I suppose it's another case of trying to get a quick fix and feel better about ourselves because life is so awful. Well, it is, isn't it? We all know that. It actually all depends on what's in fashion. Yesterday, physical mediumship using dolls. And today, the somewhat sterile and safe field of angel communications within the New Age. What form of spirit communication will tomorrow hold, I wonder? But when it gets to, when it comes to mediums, and mediums, I know, like if you've lost someone, if they've died, and you go to a medium and you want to know how they're getting on in the other world, it's possible for a medium to contact that person in the other world. When you look at people who have only just died and you want to know how they're getting on, you're playing a strange game, because the old ancient idea at death was to let that person go. Do anything to let that person go. You don't go and see a medium and say, well, I know how George is getting on because I miss him. Well, that's understandable. But if George died, I don't know why I'm saying George, but never mind. If George dies, then certainly Romany Gypsy people are obliged to let George die, to let him go. Yes, you're in grief. Yes, you hate the fact that he's gone. But you know that it's best for him and best for you to let him go. So what you do is you take all sorts of things that George liked, and at his funeral you might sort of really have a fling with those things. You know, if he enjoyed a beer, then you'd all, have a beer, have a good beer. And if he liked playing cards, you'd all play cards, and just to remember George. But then it would stop. And you would have to let George go, because George is now in the other world. George has now got another life, and you have another life. And your grief will go on, but I can guarantee that you're likely to grieve far better, if you like, if you let someone go. We should always, when communicating with anyone, any spirit, it should be somebody who's a lot further back, so that you haven't got that actual personal close connection from this life. So when I communicate with Puro, one of my beloved ancestors who first appeared through my great-grandfather, and then he came to me, I'm sure he downgraded when he came to me. But no, we have a laugh about all these things. The point is, he has no investment except to guide me along. There's no personal connection except for meeting him through my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather knew he was a long way back as well. So Puro goes back to an ancient time. This is where I get a lot of my ideas from. This is where when I'm saying, yes, and we must go back to primary organic thinking, and we must go back to the past and back to prehistory because it's the best place to be. A lot of it is inspired by Puro, who always says, if you think like this, if you do this, then you're going to be much better off. So, okay, going back to what I was saying, if you communicate with spirits, then it must be, if it's an ancestor, it must be a long way back. But the good thing about this, the good news about this, is that ancestors who are prehistoric are very, very schooled in giving you messages and omens and working with the spirit of destiny and helping you to discover which way you need to go and what you need to do in your life. Omens can come thick and fast. It's a complex area in many ways, but they can come to you via spirits of the past. So that's a good reason for not contacting people who are grandparents, great-grandparents, and letting them go and do what they need to do. I've just thought that I think there was an African tribe, I think it was African, when somebody died, they had the same name as the river, and they had to change the name of the river because they couldn't say the person's name anymore in case they brought them back to life again. And that's something that most tribal people would honour and understand. You don't say the name, you can change the person's name when they've gone so that you're not using that name to pull them back again. If you're communicating with any kind of person who is too close to you, it might not be such a good idea. I think they can influence you from a distance, but I think it's a good idea to learn how to let go in that way. Then you can let go of things in your ordinary everyday life. If you have genuine shamanic intervention with communicating with spirits, then you get to a really, really good way of communicating. It's a fun way, actually, sometimes, so it has been with my family anyway. But once again, I would urge caution when you're doing this, because neo-shamanism is rife out there, and you will get all sorts of weird and wonderful disturbances happening if you turn to that sort of communication to contact the other world. So we've got to remember, be careful with the way you communicate, and we've also got to remember that communication with the other world has always been considered a normal practice in most ancient tribal communities, and it still can be. You've really got to have a structured education in this. So that's what I spend a lot of my time trying to do, to help people to understand how they can reconnect with that real ancient essence, that source. And there's nothing better than that. It's like a food. It's like something that absolutely feeds your soul, and if you do it in that good way, it's fantastic. So Puro's full of wonderful advice on this sort of thing, and I do tend to be deeply inspired by him, and I can't help but talk about him a lot. And in the workshops I like to do some ancestral communications so that we can demonstrate how we have always done this and how we can do it to stay on the straight and narrow, if you like. Goodness knows we need communication of this kind, because this material world has become so material, it's so materialistic, it's so, it's just hard. It's become very hardened, and I think some of the ancestors I've had have said it's solidified way too much. That's an interesting word to use, isn't it, for this world? It's solidified. But anyway, I think I'll leave that there, and I can always come back and talk some more about this. If you have any questions, please do ask and make comments. Take good care. I'll see you again soon.